troubles wait at every turn. I know I can go on. No sorrow heals my soul, and burdens make me strong. Though troubles wait at every turn, I know I can go on. My sister in my heart, my brother in my song. Though troubles wait at every turn, I know I can go on. And though the journey is long, the destination is near. Though troubles wait at every turn, I know I can go on. So brothers, take my hand, and sisters, sing my song. When hope awaits at every turn, I know I can go on.
Thank you, James. Good morning. And welcome to worship at the First Unitarian Universalist Society of Burlington, Vermont. This is a congregation committed to searching for truth, advocating for justice, practicing compassion, cherishing life and possibility. We acknowledge that our meeting house, our property, sited here for more than 200 years, is on Abenaki land. For many centuries, many centuries, the home of people who are still here with us today. We are guests in this place, and we take on responsibility for its stewardship as we are responsible for stewardship of the earth. My name is Tricia Hart. I'm the developmental senior minister of this congregation, and I am glad to share this service today with a kind of a special guest, the Reverend Peter Newport, who is acting as worship associate today. He's also, for those of you who don't know us, my spouse of almost 25 years. And James Stewart, music director. Woody Fulton and Tom Hyde, I think those are the two of you that I see upstairs, our tech team today, and David McFeeters, who's also right there, and Christina Fulton, who is at home monitoring things online. And today, a special gift, a skit from some members of our racial justice team, so you'll see that in a little bit. I want to especially say hello to those of us who are online, joining us remotely, and thank as well today's welcome ambassadors, Valerie Wood-Lewis and David Call. We're inside today because it's drizzly and chilly. There is no separate children's program today. That's not because it's drizzly and chilly, but because it's Labor Day weekend. But there are toys and stuffies in the front and the back of the room. We are moving back into the sanctuary for real, for good. Well, for real anyway. in a couple of weeks, on September 18th, there will be no more pre-registration required or requested. All are welcome to come. We are deeply grateful for those of you who are choose to heed the encouragement to wear masks. And we've decided that we're going to leave this funny arrangement of every other pew with pew cushions. Some of you may be looking down right now and saying, that's why it's so uncomfortable where I'm sitting. What we hope that encourages is for people to spread out a bit in the sanctuary to give us more room. And obviously, if the pandemic situation changes, we may change all of that. That is our wisdom from now on. But we're hoping to have people feel welcome to be back inside this building as well as outside. Okay, but next week, September 11th, that is ingathering. How many of you know even what that word means? Yeah, not everybody. Cool. The tradition in this congregation, lots of other congregations, maybe especially Unitarian Universalist congregations, is that there's a Sunday, usually the one right after Labor Day, in which we mark the beginning of the congregational year. And we encourage everybody to come, even if you plan not to show up again until Christmas Eve. Come on ingathering. We will have the service next week outside so that we can gather as many folks as we can. We will have water communion, which is our chance to symbolize the pouring together of this congregation, because people all each pour a little bit of water into a big bowl. If you have special water from some special place that you've been keeping for months and months and you want to bring it next week, maybe you'll remember, and that will be great. I never have remembered my special water when I have it, and it's great if you bring it, and if you don't, that's okay too, because we'll have pictures of water and the symbolism will be the same. We're also going back to another tradition, which is having a picnic after the ingathering service. We are having it outside. And we are inviting people either to bring your own food, which you carefully keep segregated, or boldly potluck. If you are inspired to bring a big salad or a batch of brownies or the bread that you just baked or whatever it is you'd like to share with the community, please do that. We're not being super organized about it, not asking anybody to sign up ahead of time because that's always impossible anyway, and I personally think that potlucks that only have brownies and one salad are fine. But I may be weird that way. But what I'm hoping is that you will come, that you will call up the person you've been wanting to see for months and years and invite them to come too, or at least be with us online. There will be children's activities and all kinds of fun stuff during and after the service, so that we hope that you will be here. I want to stress two things. One, we still need more people to help, to volunteer, to help set up and to stay late or stay late and help to clean up. There are ways for you to volunteer. You can send me an email. You can let Mary in the office know. And I want to thank Meredith O'Malley, who is one of our very newest members, who is actually keeping the spreadsheet of people who are volunteering. So you will get more announcements about this week, about all of this week. And with Meredith's email, you can let us know. And I hope that you will help to make this a wonderful day next Sunday. People of this Unitarian Universalist Society come from many different backgrounds and hold a variety of religious and spiritual beliefs and practices. This is a good thing. We strive to be a radically welcoming community, whoever you are, wherever you are on your journey. Whatever your questions, your fears, your hopes, you are welcome here today. Let us worship. I'm going to ask Peter to light the chalice while we say together. Also, we're testing your memories today, so I should have asked, are there people who are brave enough who are here today for the first time or the second time? Are you willing to just put your hand up so that we can see who you are? Okay, cool. That's great. Those of you who are sitting near them need to help them. In a couple of weeks, we'll have the PowerPoint back, and you'll know what the words are. But in this case, you need to depend on your neighbors, okay? So speak up if you know these words. We kindle this chalice flame to remind ourselves of the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of commitment. And now our call to worship.
Our opening words this morning are from Emma Lazarus. Not like the brazen giant of Greek fame, with conquering limbs astride from land to land. Here at our sea-washed sunset gates shall stand a mighty woman with a torch, whose flame is the imprisoned lightning, and her name, Mother of Exiles. From her beacon hand glows worldwide welcome. Her mild eyes command the air-bridged harbor that twin cities frame. Keep, ancient lands, your storied pomp, she cries with silent lips. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. The wretched refuse of your teeming shore, send those to me, the homeless, tempest-tossed, to me.
And in body or in spirit, and we'll sing together hymn number 168. It's found in that hymnal in your pew in front of you. And we'll sing together one more step, hymn 168. One step, we will take one more step, till there is peace for us and everyone. Will take one more step, one more word, we will say one more word, till every word is heard by everyone. We'll say one more word, one more prayer. We will say one more prayer, till every prayer is shared by everyone. We'll say one more prayer, one more song. We will sing one more song, till every song is sung by everyone. We'll sing one more song. Thank you. Please be seated.
Hello, neighbors. Hello. Oh, isn't it a gorgeous day in the fall, even with the rain? I've got my fall vegetables still coming in, a few tomatoes left over, and if you look at that tree right over there, there's a little bit of yellow. Ah, isn't Vermont just perfect?
I'm not sure how you can say Vermont is perfect when we're going to be voting on whether or not to abolish slavery in November.
How can Vermont vote to abolish slavery when we did that about 245 years ago? I was just going to put up my new yard sign. See? First in the country, Vermont.
You're right. Vermont's Constitution does really say that people that come here or live here really are not to serve or be a servant or a slave. You're right.
Exactly. So Vermonters knew how to do this. They did it right from the very beginning of being a state.
But you might want to hold off on that sign because there are exemptions within our Constitution that will allow children who are under 21, adults and children under 21, people who want to serve, and people who owe debt or fines can still be enslaved according to what's written in our Constitution.
Yikes. So today's children can be in servitude or can be enslaved?
Yeah, let me show you my new yard sign.
But we don't have slavery happening in Vermont today. So what's the point of telling people they need to go vote to abolish slavery in Vermont?
Well, abolishing slavery without exemption is really a moral imperative for us. And doing so will hopefully help us heal as a nation, given all the harm and all the hurt that's happening and division.
So do other states allow slavery in their constitution?
Oh yeah, unfortunately, the language within our Constitution was the model for other states and the U.S. Constitution. So there are exemptions, and many states are in this process as well of voting to change their Constitution.
Yeah, but isn't this happening too fast? I mean, changing a constitution is a big deal.
Yeah, but our state legislatures, both the House and the Senate, have voted over 2 sessions, and our governor has approved this amendment.
Whoa. I don't think I'm going to be able to enjoy our Vermont fall so much knowing slavery is still legal here.
Me neither. I guess Vermont isn't so perfect after all.
You can still enjoy your Vermont fall. It's going to be a good one. But just tell everyone that it is all our job to vote yes on Prop 2 in November.
Yes. And how about we get together for some of my pumpkin pie to celebrate when we do?
Oh yeah, deal.
That's a good guess. Thank you, everyone. I'm a stand-in for Zoe now, but after the service, we have some tabling to do in the back. You can get some snazzy t-shirts, some yard signs, some stickers, because the success of this amendment really is dependent on letting everybody know, so spreading the word. So join us after the service to learn more and find out ways you can help abolish slavery in Vermont. Thank you.
I would invite all of us now into some moments of quiet together. For some of us, that means prayer. For some, meditation. For all of us, a sense of just for a few moments being fully here, where we are. If you take a breath, that helps. Maybe take one more. First, these beloved words from Wendell Berry. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time I rest in the grace of the world and am free. It is right for us to pause in our worship together to remember that each of us, all of us, every person, walks around with joys in their hearts and sorrows in their hearts and minds too. To remember that those hard things and those good things push us out of our whatever normal is, and in fact pull us closer together. You might think of a time when a friend has said to you, "Boy, you look like something is really bothering you." Or, "My goodness, you look joyful today." And then you've shared some part of yourself. It is in that sharing, both the asking of one another and the willingness to share, that we touch the deeper parts of ourselves and realize how essential that is to who we are and who we are becoming. So may our prayer be that we not resist those impulses, to reach out to one another, to share what we hope for, what is dragging us down, and remember that we are not alone. We'll rest for a moment in the silence together, and then as James plays our meditation, I would invite any or all who care to come forward to place a stone from the stones in the basket on this table. And we'll make a little sculpture together of our joys and our sorrows that we're sharing silently. We share with one another our joys and our sorrows, our hopes and our fears and our imaginations. We share our treasure as well. And we mark that by taking up an offering every week to remind ourselves that this congregation is here because people believe in it and are willing to share of themselves. We also take up an offering in order to give it away. We are sharing the offerings this month with CASN, an organization some of you have heard about before, the Chittenden Asylum Seekers Assistance Network. CASN helps families who have fled their home countries and are seeking safety in the United States. And especially during that time while they're waiting for their legal process on their asylum petitions, CASN helps to provide and find housing, support for daily living expenses, and connection to local resources and services. So do me a favor, close your eyes if you're comfortable doing that just for a minute and try to imagine what it might be like to be here alone and uncertain. And know that your gift can help the people who are helping our refugee siblings. Your gifts to this morning's offering and the offerings every day are most gratefully received. Oh, I forgot to say, there's the offering basket because we're not, even though we're inside, I still don't know if we're going to pass the basket again, but for the moment, people tell me they actually like sort of walking around during the service. So if you would like to contribute some money or a check right now, you certainly can. And it is always possible to give online through the website or actually writing a check and mailing it. All of those are possible. Thank you.
Just one person believes in you, deep enough and strong enough believes in you, hard enough and long enough before you knew it, someone else would think, if they can do it, I can do it, making it too. People you can say believe in you, and if two whole people believe in you, deep enough and strong enough believe in you, hard enough and long enough, there's bound to be some other person who believes in making it a trio, making it three. People you can say believe in me. And if three whole people, why not four? And if four whole people, why not more and more and more? And when all those people believe in you, deep enough and strong enough believe in you, hard enough and long enough, it stands to reason you yourself might start to see what everybody sees in you. Then maybe even you can believe in you too.
let us say, if you remember them, the words of our offering dedication. With gratitude, we dedicate these gifts in the service of our mission to inspire spiritual growth, care for each other and our community, seek truth, and act for justice. So when I asked Peter if he would be worship associate today, and he said yes, did you ask a bunch of questions before you said yes, or maybe you just said yes? And I said, so you get to choose. You can either do a reading in the service or you can write a reflection. And he did what I hoped he would do. He offered to write a reflection about himself and where he's from and our topic today, which is work and labor.
It's always a pleasure to address this gathering. Good morning. I proudly lay claim to being a New Englander, but New Englanders come in different flavors. I'll never be a Vermonter, though I plan to live here for a long time. And I don't want to be a Bay Stater, even though I went to college and raised my kids there. No, I am a Rhode Islander by birth, and some might say by disposition, and that's a problem. Because I am a historical person. I am an historical person. I grew up in a particular place, at a particular time, in a particular culture. I have a past, and that past has a past, and all that has passed has consequences we're all living with today. Rhode Islanders like me enjoy the fact that Rhode Island proclaimed religious freedom, lived peacefully with the Narragansett people, was first to prohibit slavery before there ever was such a thing as Vermont, formed a black battalion that served with distinction in the American Revolution, and became the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution. Oh, and we have better beaches than Massachusetts. Many people are happy with that narrative. I grew up on it. But it's like Bob Seger says, I wish I didn't know now what I didn't know then. What you're not so apt to hear right away is that neither religious refugees nor Native Americans were allowed to vote at town meetings. They were tolerated but not accepted. Providence Plantation's 1652 prohibition of slavery was never enforced, not even for a minute. Enslavement initially of Native Americans and colonization went hand in hand. The Narragansett were largely exterminated during the genocidal King Philip's War late in the 17th century, after which the colony of Rhode Island, Newport in particular, formed the apex of the notorious triangle trade in Caribbean sugar, Rhode Island rum, and African slaves. More Rhode Islanders held slaves than anywhere else in New England. There were 18th century towns in southern Rhode Island whose population approached 30% of black and enslaved people. The earliest mansions in Newport, the ones you see in all the brochures, for instance, were not built by yachty types from New York, but by real slaves for plantation owners from South Carolina and the Caribbean. Slavery was still prevalent in Rhode Island until the 1840s, abating only after whites provoked serious race riots in Providence, the Hardscrabble Riot of 1824 and the Snowtown Riot of 1831. Whites also formed a government overthrow called Dorr's Rebellion in 1842-43. In fact, slavery and economic inequality so permeated the warp and weft of life in Rhode Island that most folks didn't protest the new slavery, wage slavery, imposed by the 1793 construction of Slater's Mill on the Blackstone River in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. When I was a kid, schools organized trips to this lovely spot with its looming yellow wood frame building built out over the Blackstone flowing beneath it to power the great looms that turned southern cotton into thread and fabric. The irony lost on me at the time was that little kids, some as 8 or 10 years old, were employed in the mills to thread the needles and fix the looms. And they didn't get to go to school most of the year like I did. Within a generation, mills like Slater Mill rose astride every river or stream in Rhode Island, moving enough water to run the works. Little towns sprung up across the state like spring mushrooms to house the mostly immigrant families who worked in the mills. Not even free people of color got those jobs. And my state became effectively segregated by labor, where you could work. Growing up, I never heard anyone say the quiet part out loud. Those 19th century mills were built by local industrialists to mill southern cotton to sell back to the plantation owners as Negro cloth. Negro cloth. It was a big market. Point of fact, most enslaved people wore clothes made in Rhode Island. Negro cloth and slave cloth included fabrics like Osnaburg and homespun, linsey woolsey, broadcloth, and kersey. The clothing was uncomfortable, cheap, and disposable. Enslaved people usually wore their clothes until they were in tatters and then used the remains in quilts. These fabrics were united in one purpose only, not only to clothe enslaved people, but to mark people as enslaved. Let me tell you about a guy named Roland Hazard. The Hazard family owned 30 or so mills in Rhode Island, actively pursued the market for slave clothing, sometimes even buying overpriced raw materials from influential Southern slaveholders in order to secure a contract to clothe enslaved workers. But now that we're naming names, let me note that my own Rhode Island ancestors were Browns and Howlands, merchants, slavers, and sailors, but I hesitate to say, not Hazards. Here's the thing. Roland Hazard himself had a complex relationship with slavery, though he had a close personal relationship with slave owners. Roland worked on behalf of free blacks who had been kidnapped and sold into slavery. After being elected to the Rhode Island House of Representatives, Roland opposed the Fugitive Slave Act, proclaiming, "My own convictions are that slavery is the worst existing form of society for all concerned." Actively sold merchandise to slave owners, made money off it, and yet was an abolitionist. My own work for the past several years is to get my head and heart around how my beloved home state, the state of Rhode Island and Providence plantations, grew me up. Its past is my past. Walt Whitman has helped. Do I contradict myself? Very well, then I contradict myself. I am large. I contain multitudes. Final note, Massachusetts beaches are frequently easier to get to.
But Rhode Island beaches are still better, yeah. So my topic today is labor, not Labor Day, which is a holiday in this country, which is mostly about a day off from laboring for some, and more than anything, marking the end of summer. Now I'm going to talk about labor, about work, about jobs. And I would invite you to think back just a minute about a time in your life when you needed a job. You didn't have one, you needed to find a job, and it really mattered that you find work. And when you really didn't know how it was going to turn out. Just take a second, I won't make you stay there long, but when I asked myself that question, I remembered with some agita, a couple of months after I got married for the first time. I was just 24 years old. I had a fancy college degree. I had a slim resume and no specific skills. And I was living in a new city where my new husband was starting graduate school. We had, as I recall, no savings to count. So my income was going to be our only money coming in for a few years. That particular job search took I don't know, maybe it was 3 weeks, maybe it was a month. It seems like it took forever. I don't remember the details, but I do remember that it was hard to feel hopeful and that I was consumed with questions like, will anyone think that I'm worth even talking to? Am I worth considering for a job? I had had jobs since I was a teenager, but this felt different. And I wondered maybe I was just lucky, had been just lucky. I'd been faking it for all these years, not to mention the large question of how we were planning to pay rent and buy groceries. In the morning, I would wake up full of energy with my lists. I had lists of people to call and things to do, and I was hopeful. And by the late afternoon, I was often curled in a ball on the couch, wondering how long it would take and if I would survive. And I realized that in that particular moment, that job that I didn't have yet was justification of me, my right to be a grown-up, evidence somehow of my worth. So here I am now, 4.5 decades and many jobs later, starting the last of my 27 years as a parish minister. I'm so deeply, deeply grateful for this work I chose 30 years ago. Deeply grateful to the 10 congregations that made it possible for me to claim the job of minister, which is exhausting and inspiring and creative and frustrating, sometimes comforting, sometimes devastating, and often rewarding. Labor. How lucky I am. How fortunate I have been all my life, even in those days when I was feeling desperate. Lucky by virtue of my family, my skin color, the people who have mentored me, the unequal society in which I have lived. Here's the thing. I deeply believe that every person in this country, every person in the world, but specifically in this country, should be as lucky as I have been. Not everyone wants or can afford to spend 5+ years in getting a graduate degree, or even 4 years before that in college, and it can be argued that the world may not need more clergy. That's okay. There are many different kinds of work, many different levels of education and training. The good fortune that I want for everyone is that their labor in life might be rewarding, personally, psychologically, spiritually, and economically. People ought to be able to choose work that fits who they are and who they want to be. And they ought to be able to make enough money doing that rewarding work to live a good life for themselves and their children. I recognize that this is an American idea. It is an American ideal. And I know that our country has always failed to make this ideal a reality. Some would argue that not only did the founders never mean to include everyone, women, people without property, people who have or were enslaved, and some would say that capitalism requires an underclass, and they would be right. Nevertheless, ideals are powerful. And it makes a difference in people like you and me and our children to believe that life ought to be good and fair for everybody, that everyone's labor can be worthwhile and make a difference in the world so that we can look at it and know that it's good. Even a glance at human history, much less a complicated story like the one that Peter just told, tells us that this ideal has never been a reality. It's interesting because some ideas about work, about labor, seem ancient. Like, I don't know, the idea that there is dignity in work. Have you heard that in your life? Okay. So I looked it up, and in fact, that's a relatively recent idea, if you consider the span of human history. And when I Googled it, I found, to my surprise and personal appreciation, that there's lots and lots of religious history in the development of that idea. Some people say it starts with Martin Luther. Remember him? Reformer of the Catholic Church, nailing things on doors. One of his fundamental ideas was in the priesthood of all believers, meaning that every person who believes can have a direct relationship with God. Well, jeepers, if that's true, that means God cares, at least potentially, about everybody. This was a really radical idea in those times. And then in 1891, Pope Leo XIII, I know nothing else about him except this, but it seems important. John, you check this out. He wrote an papal encyclical about, in fact, the rights of workers and the duties of employers. It was in Latin called On Revolutionary Change. And in the early 20th century, mostly in this country, the social gospel movement in Protestantism said this other radical idea, which is that rather than waiting through this crummy life for a better life in heaven, we human beings are supposed to change the world to make it more like heaven now. We are direct descendants of that social gospel movement. And then Martin Luther King Jr. and the Civil Rights Movement. King named as a religious imperative tied to the ideals of liberty, ideas about labor and income. There's one little quote toward the end of his life. This was actually, he said this in March of 1968, a few weeks before he was assassinated. though he had had this idea for a long time. He said, "If a man does not have a job or an income, you deprive him of life. You deprive him of liberty, and you deprive him of the pursuit of happiness." We need to accept the inescapable truth that progress toward our ideals never happens in a straight line. But I think we also need to accept that it is nevertheless a path that we are on, this path toward our ideals. And sometimes we need to circle back and correct some things that we didn't get right the first time. And one of those things is this slavery issue, that we thought we took care of it. You know, we thought we took care of it, especially in Rhode Island and Vermont. We wrote it into the Constitution, but we didn't really write it into the Constitution, or we wrote it in with so many exceptions that it didn't quite take. The Abolish Slavery initiative, which is happening in Vermont, I want to just add one thing to the wonderful skit that you all gave us. And that is that we, in Vermont, are a part of a national effort by the Abolish Slavery National Network, which has actually only existed for 2 years. And their goal is, first of all, to get all 50 states, if possible, to change their constitutions, because a few don't mention slavery at all. They could still outlaw it, and many we don't have slavery pieces in their constitution which have the same kinds of exceptions that Vermont has. And those same exceptions, very similar, are in the 13th Amendment, which was passed in 1865, which supposedly outlawed slavery. The goal of the national network is to get most of the 50 states, or maybe all of them, to change their constitutions, and then to repeal the 13th Amendment in order to have a new 13th Amendment. I don't know how this happens with numbering, and you've got the same puzzled look on your face that I've had, but to get rid of the 13th Amendment as it certainly currently stands and have one saying slavery and indentured servitude are not legal in this country. That's the goal. And in fact, progress is being made. 3 states changed their constitutions last year. Vermont is one of 5 this year who have a motion of referendum on the ballot, and something like 24 are lined up to maybe change their constitutions next year. So this is a thing that's underway. And here's the point that you should know about this exception that is in the 13th Amendment. And that specifically says that slavery is not okay, except as punishment for a crime. Okay, so hold that idea. Remember what you may have heard about convict leasing, and then think about mass incarceration. And then think about the people who were making all that money in Rhode Island making slave cloth. It actually is lucrative to have enslaved people doing work and not getting paid for it. And that is the goal of this change. Does anybody know what the average wage is per day of people who are incarcerated in this country who are doing work as prisoners? Usually Peter knows, but he doesn't get to guess. Anybody know? Do you know, Betsy?
I just know it's very low, way below.
Yeah, it actually evens out because in some states they get 0 money, and this is not an optional thing to do this work. But if you average the whole country, it's 86 cents a day. The National Network to Abolish Slavery estimates that $14 billion is stolen every year from incarcerated workers, and that deprives communities that are most affected by mass incarceration of economic stability. $14 billion a year. 14 billion, did I not say it right? Billion with a B. $14 billion every year, taken from communities that could sure as heck use that money. So when you think about and talk to people about voting for Prop 2, and when you think about whether this matters, you could think about the stories of how we got into this situation, which is a good thing to do, and you could think about the possibilities for the future, where we might be able to fix some mistakes that we made. It's our work. It's what we do. And it's a good thing. Let's sing one more time.
We'll be singing together hymn number 169. Hymn 169 invites you to stand in body or spirit as we sing together, We Shall Overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we will walk in hand someday. We shall all be free. We shall all be free. We shall all be free. We shall all be free someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall all be free someday. We shall live in peace. We shall live in peace. We shall live in peace. We shall live in peace someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall live in peace someday. Please be seated.
As I extinguish the chalice, will you say the words with me and each other? We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts and share with the world until we are together again. Just before the benediction, I want to tell you that we are having coffee hour today, and kind of unexpectedly, because of the rain, we're actually having coffee hour in the parlors. For those of you who have not been here for long, don't know that it's 2.5 years since we've done that. You are welcome to get a cup of coffee or tea. You are welcome to stay and talk to people. You're welcome to leave the parlors and bring it back in here or go wherever you like. But we hope that you will hang around for a bit if you can and get to know one or two more people that you don't know already. The words of Paul Robeson: sorrow will one day turn to joy. All that breaks the heart and oppresses the soul will one day give place to peace and understanding, and everyone will be free. So may it be.
Let's all of us be the benediction this morning. Can you sing with me? We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. Thank you. Go in peace.